Excellence is continuous. It can be complex or simple. Each day is an open challenge to achieve success and turn adversity into opportunity. At RGF Executive Search Japan, we make winning a daily objective by aligning unique bilingual talents who invigorate organizations and drive sustainable growth. Excellence begins and ends with people. To execute your Japan recruitment relationship, contact us and let's begin.
Good evening and welcome to the Fireside Chat with Catherine Ohura, Thinking Outside the Box. My name is Ryan Sheppard from RGF Executive Search, and I will be your host this evening. Thank you so much for joining us. And Catherine, thank you so much for being here. I've known you less than a year, but we've gotten to know each other so well, and I've loved getting to know you. So looking forward to sharing with the world today about your story and some of the experiences you've been through, which I'm sure can be an inspiration for us all. So Catherine, thank you very much for being here today.
Thank you so much, Ryan. Really glad to be here, and I really appreciate the opportunity as well.
So just a brief introduction. Before a brief introduction, two announcements. First of all is that the Q&A will be open about 15 minutes into the event. It is set to anonymous by default within the Microsoft Teams setting, but if you wish, you can enter your name into that field. It's your choice. So please take note of that. Second of all, this really today is about Catherine and her story. And while she is currently the general manager, Japan, of LabCorp drug development, her views may not represent LabCorp drug development and are really about Catherine's story today. So just to make that clear as well. Brief introduction for Catherine. She has been born and raised in Japan, but started her career in the US in R&D for a Japanese pharmaceutical company before joining Bristol Myers, and then transferred to Japan with them. She then transferred into commercial and then joined GHIT as CEO and is now the general manager Japan for LabCorp drug development, formerly known as Covance. Or perhaps still known as Covance. Correct me if I'm wrong, Catherine. So I'll leave it at that. We're going to have a fireside chat, myself and Catherine, just exploring her story, her experiences for the first part, and then open it up to Q&A. So please feel free to ask any questions, which will be moderated by a moderator and addressed in the latter half of this session. So Catherine, again, it's great to have you here. Maybe you can give us, the audience, a broad introduction of who you are and why you got into healthcare in the first place.
All right. Thank you so much, Ryan, and thanks for the introduction. And just before I go through who I am, I'd like to sprinkle some key words that would appear today. And thinking outside the box is one of them. A key phrase, if you would. Another would be connecting dots. So you'll see that throughout, perhaps you'll see that throughout my experience and my story. And finally, why not? So this you're gonna see repeatedly throughout this why not concept. And basically to answer your question of why I am, who I am, where I am, etc., is really a key phrase there is this why not concept. So with that, I'll go ahead and start where born and raised in Japan, like you said. So born in Kyushu Prefecture, so in Japan on the southern side, and moved over to Kanagawa Prefecture. So I was primarily born and raised in the Kanagawa Prefecture. Completely in a Japanese educational system or environment through the entire kindergarten and elementary school. From middle school, however, because of my parents or my mom's intentions, she wanted me to go into an international setting, intending for me to go international to become a global talent, someone who can work abroad as well as in Japan. So she and my dad let me into an American school. still located in Japan, but it was completely an American school system. It was actually located within a US base, and it was in Camp Sama. So truly no Japanese, just pure Americans and American schools. So you can imagine I didn't speak any English, but you get thrown into that type of an environment. You have to survive, right? And this is early on, I kind of realized this. Okay, this is the situation that I'm in. Why not? I'll go through this. And so that was, one of the beginning moments of why not, if you would. So through that middle high school, I went through U.S. education in Japan, but from college, I moved to the U.S., to Colorado in the U.S. for college, and was studying chemistry, math, and business. And with that, I think you asked me earlier why I got into healthcare, but with that combination of degrees, if you would, is really where I started thinking about what is it that I can do and what I want to do with this degree. And at the time, so I was in the chemistry department. I was talking to my mentor at school, and even the chair of the chemistry department. It was odd for someone to have a science degree and a combination with a business degree. And originally they had kind of opposed that, and they said, don't do that, choose another science, choose physics, bio, anything, just not business. And I said, why not? Why can't I choose? Why can't I combine the two? Long story short, I ended up, being able to combine the two. And my thought process there was I really wanted to study science, of course, but I wanted to use that or apply that somehow in the business setting or more hands-on setting, if you would. So that kind of led to that combination, which then led to the pharmaceutical industry at the end. And at that point, as you mentioned, I did join a Japanese pharmaceutical company. At the time, Kyowa Hakko, now it's Kyowa Hakko Caring. But I joined the U.S. Operations of Kyowa Hakko. And it was really, really small. We were just starting up the U.S. operations or drug development operations. And it was maybe 3 people, 4 people. So it was a great experience to kind of go through, to be molded, if you would, and to learn, what drug development was, what it was to create an organization. So I learned quite a bit at Kyowa. As you said, I found project management actually became my functional skill set or my passion, if you would. So during my days at Kyowa, I studied master's in quality assurance and regulatory affairs. But at the same time, I also did project management, and that really became my passion. I really love the discipline of it, but also the art of it. So they typically call project management an art and a science. And I love both parts of it. So really the practice of project management, but also the discipline, the science behind project management. And yes, there is such a thing. And so I actually pursued a PhD in project management and started that while I was at Kyowa. And during that time, I moved on to Bristol Myers Squibb in headquarters. So that was also in Princeton, New Jersey. And I was then assigned as the global project manager for, now we all know the product as Optivo. And from there, again, you can imagine, great experience there. And from there, I was sent to Japan, the BMS KK office in Japan as an expat. And really the intent there was to create an organization called Japan R&D Operations. That in itself was, again, a fascinating experience. And just looking back, every time, those role changes, the opportunities came through, I always ask myself that question, right? The key question of why not? And of course, family matters, all of that considered, I would always ask that. And if there was no, bad things, if you would, coming from the why not question, then I'll go ahead and pursue it kind of thing became my, normal practice, if you would. From there, I went on to GHIT, like you said, and again, very, very different experience because it wasn't a drug development organization, or it wasn't a pharmaceutical company. It was more of an NPO. So very different environment, learned quite a bit again. And again, when I chose that to pursue that opportunity, that whole why not question came in. Now, of course, there are doubts, right? Like, can I do this? You know, I've never been in this environment. I've never done this role. You know, am I going to be able to do this? Am I going to be enough, to do this? But again, always that why not came in and said, you know what, if it doesn't work out, then so be it. Then I'll go ahead and pursue different opportunities, etc. So there's really no stopping me, if you would, in that sense. So after GHIT, I joined the current organization, like I said, LabCorp, Drug Development Japan. And it is LabCorp. It's no longer Covance, just to clarify. It's again a very interesting experience in that LabCorp right now is going through an interesting phase of really true growth in Japan. You may notice if you look back throughout my experience, Japan is always in there as a key factor. So looking back, again, born and raised in Japan, but looking back into my first job experience, which was Kyohako, it was a Japanese organization located in the US, but it was a Japanese organization working with Japan. My second job, which is BMS, an American company, but having the potential of going to the Japan office and working in the Japan office. And that was already discussed prior to me joining BMS even, just to make sure that there was that opportunity that I was able to go to Japan. So that Japan piece is always there. And obviously GHIT and LabCorp is located in Japan. I'm currently located in Tokyo. So that piece of it is there. And you may ask why. Why Japan is, sprinkled through all throughout my career. It may have to do with the fact that I'm half Japanese, half Ecuadorian. So if you go way back and remember what I said earlier, my mom's intention of, having me into this global, personnel, if you would, was coming from her background of being Ecuadorian. She wanted me to not just stay in Japan, but, go global. And perhaps it was because I grew up in that type of an environment. This whole why not concept came in, of course, but also this Japan identity became really, really important, and it became a core of who I am. When you talk to mixed race individuals in Japan, you hear a lot about identity crisis, etc. I probably went through that at one point. I don't remember specifically as to when it was, but I probably did. And, from there on, you kind of have to identify who you are. And at one point I said, you know what, I'm Japanese, and I want to be, I want to be involved in Japan, with Japan, help Japan. And it could be helping the patients in Japan, helping society, whatever it is. I wanted something to do or contribute to Japan. So that's kind of where that came from. And that still continues. So for me, it wasn't about, an intentional career ladder development, if you would, throughout my career. It was more about how can I maximize my skill sets to really fully, contribute to society, both in Japan and the US, because I did have that US background or education and work experience as well. So that kind of, goes throughout my entire career and my life, to be honest. So I'll stop there. I'm already talking a lot, but I'll stop there for now.
It's really interesting how you started at a Japanese company in the US to a US company in Japan. What are some of the things that struck you in terms of cultural differences, organizational differences within those organizations that you took away from those experiences to cultivate your skill as a global leader?
Yeah, so working in Japan setting and working in the US setting is quite different, as you can imagine, right? culturally, so working with the people is different. The work style is different. How you think, so your mindset is different. Communication style, and I don't mean the language, but just communication style, how you communicate decisions, questions, et cetera. All of that is different. And what I found, unique, I guess, about myself, or what I intentionally started doing, was I become wherever that culture is, I become that person. So let's say if I'm in the US working with US colleagues, the expectation is you think like an American, you think like a Westerner, if you would. So I become one. And I try to, be Catherine Ohura, right? Whereas when I come to Japan, I become myself, if you would. I am, the identity, like I said earlier, was Japanese. So I become Japanese, so pure Japanese, almost as if I don't speak, any English, even to that extent. So truly become immersed in that environment, in that culture. And that naturally brings out the communication style, all of that comes with that identity, if you would. So it's really funny. I mentioned this to a few people that I almost feel like I have split personality because, I become like, I'm like this chameleon, right? Who becomes American at one day, the next day I'm Japanese. Who the heck are you? But, I am one person. I am that. I have that core. But, I'm probably good at kind of adjusting myself and becoming that chameleon between the two cultures. So I found that was, one of the critical pieces, if you would, in really working and really emerging into those environments accordingly. At least that's what's worked for me.
Very, very interesting differences, Japanese organization to US organization, US to Japan. And within that, where did this aspiration to become a commercial leader come from? R&D is such a complex organization in itself, very scientifically driven. And of course, the commercial organization is also patient-centric, if you would. But how did that aspiration to become a commercial leader and ultimately a CEO emerge from?
So I didn't always look at positions or titles per se. So I didn't say, you know what, I want to be a CEO or I want to be a GM or a commercial leader. It was about what that position entails in terms of influence, what you can do in that position. And to me, what I was really interested in is something I mentioned earlier, which is having an impact or influence or contribution to patients and further to society, wherever that is. It could be Japan or the US or anywhere else. So in order to do that and to maximize what I have, all of my capabilities, skill sets, experience, whatever it is, where can I do that in a maximum way? And when I thought of that, the positions, kind of came about. It wasn't, like I said, it wasn't about the title. It was just about, oh, okay, the recognition of that position is able to do that. And this position is able to do that. And to me, that was really interesting. And once I kind of saw that, I said, okay, what am I lacking or what type of experience do I need to get closer to that position or to be closer to be able to do that, to that execution or the impact, the influence, the contribution piece. So that was kind of my mindset or thinking behind that.
Wonderful. What are some of the kind of role transition essential challenges you had, skills that you needed to learn that perhaps someone with an MR background, for example, would have had, and that would have been required on the job description for similar positions? What are some of those skill gaps that you faced, and how did you ever overcome quickly coming up to speed with some of those skill gaps?
Yeah, so for me, it was about, the switch between R&D to commercial, right? So, and I personally like that order, if you would. So doing R&D first and then moving on to commercial was, in my mind, very beneficial. At least it worked for me, because it actually takes longer, right? Drug development takes a long time. So for example, like Kyowa, I was on this one product for 10 plus years, only one product, right? But you go through preclinical all the way to approval of the product. So it takes a long time. And to learn all of the different functions, what's involved in R&D, that experience, that length of time was necessary, at least for me. Now, moving from R&D, from that experience to commercial, it's a very different dynamic, right? And one of my key roles that I took on, which was the head of BMS Network of Women. And this is a people and business resource group. So you see that in any, pretty much any organization. It's part of diversity and inclusion, and they have the women's group. They have other, groups as well. And it was being the GM, the general manager of that group. And I think that was really, one of the key role transitions for me, because it wasn't just about running this organization. It was really about running it as a business, was really the mandate coming from the CEO at the time at BMS. And what they did, with me, and I was really, thankful for this opportunity, was that I worked side by side with a consulting firm, a very large consulting firm. I'm not going to name any names, a large consulting firm, and started kind of training, if you would, on the job training kind of thing. About, number one, building a business plan. What does it entail to build a business plan? What does it take to think, as a business, what's successful in a business? What kind of KPIs do you set? How do you set them? How do you create an organization of, 3,000-4,000 people, which is how large that group was. So all of these things kind of, was meshed together as an experience through that role. And that was, in my mind, really the bridge between R&D and commercial. So taking on that type of a role or opportunities, I think is absolutely critical. Now, I've never done anything like it before, right? I wasn't involved in the diversity and inclusion, for example. I was truly R&D. But what interested me a lot was really that role that I've never done before. And the learnings that probably would come behind it is what I was thinking. And of course, at the end, the key question of why not, right? So all in all, I think that was, a key position or a key role probably comes in when you're switching pretty, large switch, if you would, from like something like an R&D organization to a commercial organization. And from there, you recognize what you're missing. And you just start adding on to that experience. For me, it really works when I just ask questions. I ask a bunch of questions. And there are always people who are experts in any of the fields, right? And I just go to them and say, you know what? Can I have 30 minutes of your time? Can you explain to me the A to Z of whatever, marketing, or A to Z of finance, or whatever it is? I'll just go up and ask. And most of the times, most people won't say no. I actually haven't had anybody say no. So typically people are willing to share their experience, their expertise. And in my, from my experience, that's the best way for me to learn, at least. So that's kind of how I started, filling the gaps, and really on the job training is probably the biggest.
Wonderful. Well, I've heard you talk so much and very passionately about your experience at BMS, but you left all that behind to go to GHIT. So how did that come up, and what was it that attracted you to that role?
And again, I probably would have stayed at BMS. There was nothing wrong, with BMS. Actually, if anything, I loved the environment. I loved the company. I loved the people. But at one point in your career, in your role, you kind of see ahead and you say, okay, what's next? What can I do further? And when you start, not being able to kind of assess that or see that clearly, that's when you start thinking. But again, I wasn't actively looking. But this opportunity of GHIT just came about. And it was a CEO position. Again, very different from a GM position. I didn't know at the time. I didn't know that because I had never done a CEO position or a role. But I say, I've never done this role, and going back to that contribution piece of it, it is a NPO, and I really like the cause that they had. in their mission and vision. So those are the big two reasons. I've never done the role, but also their vision, what they believed in. So again, that key question came in of why not, and I took on the role, and boy, am I glad I did, because there's just so much learning in doing something or being exposed to something you've never been exposed to before. And that's always been the case and kind of consistent throughout my career as well, is I love learning new things. So going into a different industry was, quite a stretch, but it was still, as you can imagine, a huge learning experience. And all of those learnings really just comes back and helps you throughout your job, your next role, your role after that. So I can tell you, all the way back from Kiowa to BMS to GHIT, every single one of the roles, I've learned so much, and every single person that I worked with is who I learned from. So who I am today is really from all of those people and all of those organizations. So I always, kind of think about that and look back and say, you know what? Wow, not one regret really with all of the roles and positions, good and the bad.
Wonderful. Well, there's already questions that are rolling in, but I'd like to ask you, at this point in your career, looking back to where you were at Kiowa when you just joined BMS, before you had reached these levels of leadership, what advice would you give to your younger self that perhaps some of the viewers watching this who are emerging leaders could take away to think about designing their own career? What would you say to your younger self?
So I would say it's okay not to be perfect. And don't get me wrong, I'm not at all perfect. And I was probably the hardest critic to myself, to be honest. So, while I was building career, while I was working, I gave birth, I had children, you had to raise them, and, all of that stuff, life comes into play. And I wanted to balance everything perfectly. I wanted to have all of the balls in the air perfectly, not drop any one of them. And to me, that required perfection. And in my mind, that was probably not necessary. So right now, if I could go back, I'd say to myself, you know what? Do as much as you can and be easy on yourself, kind of. It's okay. You're going to make mistakes, period. And it's from those mistakes is where you learn really the most. I made so many mistakes. God bless everybody who helped me through all of those times. But it's those times that I learned quite a bit from. So it's not about all of the successes. It's really about all those obstacles that you were mentioning earlier that you learn from. And so, but be easy on yourself a little bit. You don't have to be a perfect mom, to be a perfect employee or to be a perfect boss. Be yourself, I think is the biggest lesson throughout these years, 20 odd years of my career. So that's where I would go. That's what I would tell myself. Muted again.
One of the things that you allude to a lot is using your differentiators as a weapon, and starting with being in the U.S. as a Japanese speaker and positioning that, using that to position yourself in your future career. One of the questions we have rolling in here is, what if you've had a rocky career to date, where you've been forced to leverage your weaknesses and thus never have been able to shine? How would you imagine someone can transition into where they can leverage their strengths from sales to analytical work? This is someone who's not a salesperson, to ensure they can sell it and have a fair idea that of where that person would be a better fit.
Yeah, so I think self-awareness is absolutely critical. Some people call it self-branding, self-awareness, but basically what that implies, at least in my mind, is that you know what your strengths are and you know what your differentiators are, like you said. And how to leverage that, right, is the key in my mind. So in any position, at least in my mind, in any position, there always is something, maybe tiny, teeny tiny, but something that you can leverage, that you're good at, that you can really hang on to, if you would. And if there's that one thing, I would say, advertise yourself, promote yourself, go out and start initiatives, start a team, start a whatever it is, a project, of course, in discussion with your manager. But do that. What's stopping you to do that, right? And if it leads to anywhere, where the organization's success or the contribution or the influence that I was talking about earlier, if it leads to that, no one's going to say no. So in any position, in analytical position, in an MR, sales position, in a CRA position, whatever position there is, there's got to be something. There's that one thing that you can hang on to and say, I'm really good at that. I may not be that great, or I may not like the entire, analytical, piece, let's say, but even in analytical, there's that one thing that I'm really good at, I'm interested in. Then do that, make that a bigger avenue, if you would, because people would always see that, and they'll be like, okay, well, if you can do that, then there's this role over there that's more like that role, what you just did. So why don't we give you that project, let's say? Why don't you get involved in that project first? And then if you're good at it, then why don't we make you a project leader of that? Then why don't you move into that department, for example? So it kind of leads, from that teeny tiny, piece all the way to the next role potentially, or a next department, et cetera. So that's the advice that I would give, is really know what you're good at and look for that one thing that you can utilize or leverage.
So look for that one thing that sets you apart and really leverage that to ask for opportunities. And
Yep.
As they say, ask and you'll receive. Right?
Yeah. Why not?
Why not? And how about from an organizational perspective? You've been in a Japanese company and an American company, and there's a stigma still associated with Japanese companies that perhaps are more top down, and American companies are more bottom up, which could vary based on the country and the company itself. But as a leader, what would be your advice to other organizations to cultivate an environment where people are comfortable to find that one thing and speak up about it, to ask for opportunities, and to think outside the box?
So typically in any organization, the leaders are always looking to grow the business, number one, but also to contribute, right, to patients in our industry, but to society, et cetera. That's one common goal, regardless of who you are in the organization. Now, if what you're trying to do leads to that in any way, no one's going to, deny you. No one's going to argue with you, et cetera, in my mind. Now, that's coming from the bottoms up piece, right? Now, what do you do from the top down? If you're in the manager position, you got to have that open mindset, right? You're going to have to be able to, capable to listen to all levels of the organization. Just because someone's young, for instance, you can't just say, hey, that doesn't matter, or you don't know anything. You know what? They may not have the experience that you do, as a senior leader, but they're going to come up with those nuggets that only that generation is able to provide. Digital is a great example, right? Nowadays, you can't live without digital. And all of these, newly grads, let's say, they're all digital natives. You have to utilize that. And this, to me, ties in directly with diversity and inclusion, to be honest. It's really not about, the labels. It's really not about female, male, LGBT, it's not about that. It's really about coming in with different thinking, different contributions, if you would, into the organization. And as senior leaders, that's absolutely critical to be able to accept, if you would, and utilize all of that. Because as you know, data shows that you need to have, diversity to really flourish in terms of the business. So I would say I would really hone in on that from a senior level, folks.
Wonderful. And at this particular moment in time, we happen to be 1 week out of the state of emergency concluding itself, just 1 week ago from today, in fact, at least here in Japan. So what a pivotal time this is for us all to start thinking outside the box, literally, as we've been in quarantine. Catherine, what do you think are some of the key lessons we can all take away from this time in lockdown and the pandemic itself, and be better leaders, regardless of title and seniority and even industry?
Yeah, so one thing that I personally learned, and from talking with other folks via remote, so via Teams and Zoom, etc., is that we had a lot of time, right? So because we're working remotely, we didn't have to commute to the office every day. We don't have to get dressed and, all of that. Well, maybe some people did, but I personally just, was in pajamas most of the time. But anyway, so there's more time individually to really think about many things, anything. And from my experience, that time was really helpful to kind of reset my mind in terms of what is it that I really want to do? What is my brand? Who do I want to work with? Where do I want to work? Midterm, short-term, midterm, and long-term. So I think this pandemic, unfortunate as it is, it also brought some opportunities in terms of that time to think, and that opportunity to think, if you would. So to me, that was really valuable, because time, you can't buy time. And that was one of the biggest things that came out. And you can really utilize that time in research. You can search, the web if you wanted to. You can talk to people. I've actually started talking to new people that I've never met before. So even that's creating network, trying new things. Just one example that I can give you is while I was a GHIT, this role, the CEO role, was brand new. It entailed being, in a board membership. So I was on the board of GHIT. I didn't know what that was, what that meant, So, okay, so hi, Ryan, you're now a board member. If you didn't know if you were never on a board, would you know what a board member is or does? You probably wouldn't. I was the same way. I had no idea. And I didn't know that I didn't know. So here I am thinking, oh, a board meeting is just a business review meeting type thing, executive meeting. And I've done that, at BMS, I've done that before. Not at all. So what did I do? I actually went out to a different organization, the Tokyo American Club, actually, and raised my hand to be in the election for a board member, a board of governors. And that, again, I probably couldn't have done if it wasn't in the pandemic era, because I had that time, that little bit of time, the commuting time. If you add that, it's like 2 hours a day, right? So it's because of that time I was able to do other things that I was interested in or what I wanted to learn further. So by doing that role, and thankfully I was elected into the Tokyo American Club Board of Governors, but because of that role, I was able to apply that learnings into the GHIT board membership role or functionality, if you would. So that was, one example, but those types of things or opportunities, I think, came out of this pandemic experience. At least for me, it did.
Absolutely. Turning the obstacle into an opportunity to learn something new and leverage that and apply that. We have a very good question from a viewer who is asking, what are some of your favorite interview questions when hiring for your team? For example, are there any specific kinds of questions you like to ask to determine how good they are at thinking outside of the box?
So there's one question I love, and maybe I shouldn't say this much because everyone's going to prepare if anyone is interested in coming. But I love to ask the question of, what do you want to be when you grow up? And it doesn't matter if it's not about age. It's not about, where you are in your career. It's really about aspirations. What is it that's important to you? You know, what is it that you want to do with your time? You know, let's be honest, working, you know, a career is predominantly your entire, you know, what, 80%, 60%, whatever, of your life. That's a lot of time that you're spending. What is it that you want to do with that? You know, please let me hear about that. And you'll be surprised as to what kind of responses come out of that. Some people would immediately have an answer. And that would tell me, okay, you're always, you know, thinking in that way. Others would struggle. You know, they'll say, well, I'm happy with what I'm doing now. And, you know, there isn't much. So, you know, some people would struggle, and others would be very clear as to, I like what I'm doing right now, and I want to continue doing what I'm doing right now for the next 20 years. And that's beautiful. That's okay too. You need all kinds of people in an organization. As I said, you know, diversity. So that's one question that I really love to ask. And it actually goes many ways from there. So there's a huge avenue also. But what is it? What do you want to be when you grow up? And how is this organization or this opportunity going to help you with that, is the question that I love.
It's really getting them back in that childlike dream state to see who are they really and how can they express that in a perhaps somewhat tense interview situation as well. Very good. Well, I want to loop back for a moment, back to your career and where you are now, General Manager of LabCorp Drug Development, and give you a chance to use this platform to talk a little bit about why you joined, what your vision is, and you know, any message you'd like to convey to some of your employees who may be watching this now or at some point.
Yeah, so what the reason, you know, there are a couple of reasons as to why I joined LabCorp, but I think the primary reason as to why I joined was the potential that the organization had or has. So the organization combined, right? So LabCorp and Covance merged in 2015. And from there on, to me, that combination is beautiful, is genius, because you have LabCorp is a huge organization that does, it's a champion in diagnostics, basically, in the US. And you have this organization, CRO organization, Covance. By joining hands, the potential is incredible, meaning that you have all of that capabilities and data from the diagnostics, the lab piece of it, but you can also translate that into clinical trials, right? Because that's, you know, where the CRO drug development piece comes into play. Having that combination to me is very, very unique. There are no other CROs that have that combination at that level, if you would, that size. So to me, that was exciting. Now, when it comes to Japan, now LabCorp is really looking into growing the Japan business, the Asia Pac business. And we have the Japan growth strategy rolling out from last year, actually. So we're really in that exciting stage of building and really strengthening and growing the organization. So in my mind, that's always an exciting time in any role. It's like, I feel like I'm a kid in a candy shop, right? I'm like, ooh, you know, we can do this, we can do this. It's really exciting, and that's one thing that's really, really important to me, is to have fun. You know, I love having fun. I love, you know, being, you know, in this happy state with working with people that think alike. And the power and the energy that comes out of that is incredible, really. So that's where the thinking outside the box really just easily comes into play, because people are just now thinking really open, you know, wow, we can do anything, you know, what can we do? So it's that state, you know, of mind that you're in that allows for that think outside the box, the why not, you know. So to me, that was really, really appealing. So those two things were really appealing in coming into LabCorp. It was that unique differentiator as an organization, as well as the growth in Japan that the state is in right now.
Wonderful. And, you know, you've touched upon so many different sectors of healthcare, different regions and different pharmaceutical, non-government organization, GHIT, and you've been exposed to inner workings both in Japan, but also globally. Where do you hope that the leaders of the industry can work towards in terms of making a more sustainable healthcare industry and the ecosystem?
I think all of the above. So by going through all of those, different experiences and different environments, if you would, if you think about the industry, it's almost siloed, right? So you have different pharmaceutical companies, you have NPOs, you have CROs, you have labs, you have all of these different businesses in one industry. Now, to me, that's, if you think about it on a large scale, those are all silos, right? What if we can connect all of that across and, I won't say break the silos, but have that horizontal piece going through, be able to collaborate together. Then what? Then what can this industry do? So to me, that's really exciting, and that's almost needed, to really get into the maximum, capabilities of the pharmaceutical industry. So I know it's easier said than done, of course, right? And there are ways to do that already that's in place, like pharma, there are organizations that do intend to do that horizontal piece. But more of that, let's use technology. Maybe it's about having, join hands with digital technology companies. Maybe it's about joining forces with GAFA, who knows? But it's that horizontal piece that I think is going to become key, because until now it's been, siloed. And I think the great learnings that came out of the COVID situation is exactly that. We joined forces, NPO, pharmaceutical companies, the government, all of those joined forces to make this happen, to have the vaccines come out so quickly. So that's kind of the concept that I'm talking about. But I think more and more that would become critical as an industry.
Wonderful, and that ties into another question that's rolled in, which says, "Thank you for being yourself. It is very admirable to be like that in front of hundreds of people. How do you want to create or facilitate the real open innovation in the pharmaceutical industry at LabCorp in Japan?" I think this is getting to how you want to create what you just talked about with what you have at LabCorp.
Yep. So one word or one phrase that I'm also starting to utilize within the organization is One Japan. And this is because we're in LabCorp Japan that I'm specifically using this phrase. But, perhaps until now it was a bit siloed. Like I was talking about, the pharmaceutical industry, but now I'm talking about LabCorp itself, somewhat was siloed perhaps. Now, why don't we connect all forces across, become that one Japan, one team, if you would. From there, again, I think there's a ton that we can do, but that's, I think, in my mind, that's the first step. That's the first critical step that needs to happen first. That really starts to create that safe environment, that idea creation, the flow of ideas, the think outside the box concept would really start coming in, because you're no longer afraid of that, coming out of the silo mentality. Perhaps you're in the beginning, you're pretty afraid or scared, but once you start open up that horizontal piece and make it so that it's safe, then people would naturally start to come up with innovative ideas and crazy ideas, to be honest, because some of those crazy ideas really are good ideas. So that's the One Japan, the one team creation piece, I think, to me is absolutely critical. And that's what I'll be working on initially.
Sounds exciting. And as I've been communicating with various company leaders, one theme that comes up so often is just how global companies want their Japan leaders to be more present on the global stage. And one of our viewers is asking a very good question. In fact, this is the first question to come in, but I missed it. My apologies. And that is, what's your advice for Japanese people who want to pursue a career in the US?
So my advice would be exposed, number one, right? And don't be afraid. Always have that why not concept there. But really, when I say be exposed, it could be in Japan. Like I said, I went through an American education system in Japan. So it's not about location, it's about the environment in my mind. So seek those environments where you can interact in that type of an environment. You can seek advice or work with people in similar mindset or global mindset, if you would. So I would seek out for those types of environments and opportunities, number one. Number two, English, of course, that's one thing that, you'll have to study or practice, etc. But those like minds would have that environment anyway. You'll be utilizing English, etc. So seek out those opportunities or environments. And nowadays, you have everything on the web. It's very convenient to find those groups or networks, etc. So that's where I would go. Seek out, if you would. And see if there are opportunities come out, believe it or not, from just conversations, from just having a beer conversation, something would spur up, and take those opportunities.
Wonderful. And speaking of starting conversations, that's really where great opportunities start. And here at RGF Executive Search, we are focused on executive opportunities. And a lot of the time, those positions are not advertised. There is a hidden market out there that is discoverable through relationships, and we exist to bridge those with you. So if you're a candidate watching this, reach out for a conversation. And if you are an organization looking for top talent, globally minded talent, reach out. We'd love to talk to you as well so we can create opportunity. And would like to give you, Catherine, one last opportunity. If there's anything else you'd like to leave the audience with today, any messages from you to the world?
So like I said, I've said enough, but really if you can just keep in mind the key phrases, I think, and I hope it would help, which was the connecting the dots. So all of those things that connect towards the career or what you want to do is one thing, but really, why not? Always stop and think, why not? Don't let anything kind of stop you. If it's going to be harmful, don't do it. If it's going to be harmful to others, don't do it. But if you think, and if you think it's too much for you, if you think you're not going to be able to do it, try it first. There's nothing wrong with trying something first. The worst thing that could happen is that you're back to where you were. That's not that bad. So just always take that leap of faith, if you would, believe in yourself. I think that's absolutely critical. And, even doing that, this is one thing that I did want to mention. I sometimes lose that confidence. It's like, oh my gosh, what have I done? There's no way I can do this role. There's no way I can do that role. Always remember that if you're selected into that role, they believe that you can do it. So they believe in you, and that's why you were selected in that role and you were accepted into that role. So always know that if you're selected, then you can do it. So don't doubt yourself. Just try it, and always keep remembering the why not concept. So that's where I would leave this with.
Well, thank you so much, Catherine, for sharing your story today. I really appreciate it, and I hope everyone watching this could get something out of this conversation as well, to help you in your own career or your own organization's journey. And this concludes today's Fireside Chat. Perhaps next time we can have a real fireside. Why not? But thanks again, Catherine, and all the best to you in your new endeavor at LabCorp Drug Development.
Thank you so much, Ryan, and thanks everyone.
Thank you very much. Have a good evening, everyone. Stay safe.
Bye-bye.